Welcome back to Psypris' Asylum. In this episode, we'll be discussing bought versus made cosplay, the implications and the defense of both sides. As we've already gone over, buying a costume is when you either commission an individual to make an outfit or buy a pre-made costume online from a bulk store. Making your own cosplay is where you, make your own. Now, I'm mostly focusing on detailed costumes since closet cosplay is usually in its own category. And of course, buying or making your costume does not mean you didn't also make or buy pieces. For example, you could buy a base costume and then add detailing to make it unique to you. Or you could make the base costume but buy a pre-made weapon to really seal the deal. In this discussion, I'm not going to be talking about wigs, shoes, or really any weapon or accessory that goes along with a costume. Those are such case-by-case scenarios and really don't fall under the stereotypes of buying or making. For the sake of this podcast, we're focusing only on the fabric part of the costume, the outfit one wears to represent the character. A made costume will be a costume that could enter any costume contest, so at least 60% of it was made by the contestant, and in this case, the cosplayer wearing the costume. A bought costume contrasts this as a fully completed outfit that you can literally pull out of a box and be done. Now, I personally make the majority of my costumes. I have previously purchased things such as leotards to use as a base and then add on the rest of the costume, like my Lilith from Darkstalkers. But lately, I've been making pretty much every piece myself, with the exception of small items like socks. I weigh a few factors when making my decision. Is it something that already exists that's 100% accurate? Which way is cheaper? And how long would it take to make versus the feeling of accomplishment that I made the piece? Because sometimes it's actually more expensive to make an item of clothing yourself. For example, I'm currently making a revised costume of Yuffie from Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Her shirt is just a black tank top with white flowers, and because I don't want to show my midriff, an existing tank is perfect for me. So for $3 off of Amazon, I bought a base black shirt that I can now spend time appliquing her flowers onto, versus buying the fabric that would more than likely be around $6.99 a yard and can take half an hour to an hour to make. It probably shouldn't take that long, but I tend to get distracted. Now, if people ask me if I made the shirt, I would admit that I just appliqued the flowers on a pre-existing shirt. However, I did make all the other pieces, with the exception of the base shorts that I attached the leather bits to. So if asked if I made the costume myself, I would say yes, because more than 60% of it was done by me. Now, I don't think most cosplayers really look at the percentage before they answer that question, but really, the question when someone asks, did you make that yourself, is usually, was there another person involved? Did you get that from an online store or a commissioner? Did you have a friend help you? That sort of thing. Now, I always felt really guilty about buying a costume because of the way people always talked about it. It's almost as if the person purchasing the costume is lazy or not actually a fan of the series. And that's just silly. Some people really can't sew. Does that mean they shouldn't be able to cosplay? Of course not. Again, I can pull from my experience. I cosplay Sasuke from Naruto, and I made the Shippuden outfit myself. I liked the outfit I made, but the top required open chest binding, which I actually love doing, but it's a long process that I can't do alone, and I can't leave the binding on for too long, otherwise my skin will start to blister. Long story short, I decided to do his alternate outfit, but I couldn't get the collar on the shirt looking right, and I got disgruntled. I love cosplaying Sasuke, but I didn't want to wear what I made in public. At that point, the costume became a burden. I was too self-conscious, and I wouldn't have any fun. So I said screw it, and I purchased a pre-made costume. I already had the entire costume made, but now I was able to switch out the shirt, and I actually switched out the pants as well after some debating. And now I can cosplay the character for fun and not worry about my craftsmanship. Does that mean I was lazy? I hope not. I spent time and money making the first costume entirely, and I did make the alternate shirt myself the first go around. Am I a fake fan of the series or the character? I think wanting to focus on my portrayal of the character rather than the silly collar is proof that that's actually the opposite of the truth. And I think this is the case for a lot of people. Certainly there are going to be those who want a costume to wear just in a casual manner to fit in, so to speak. But for the most part, no one spends money on something that they don't actually care about. But sometimes you have to weigh the time and effort that would go into making a costume versus your actual talent and the estimated outcome. So I've already discussed the implications behind buying your costume. What do they say about those who make their own? Honestly, I haven't really heard much distaste for those who make their own costumes, considering the hobby is mostly full of those who would make at least part of their costume, if not the entire thing. But arbitrarily, I will point out two possibilities. Those who make their costumes could be seen as stuck up and obsessed. The idea that they're stuck up is based entirely off of what those who compete have said about purchase costumes. They think of them as cheap Halloween quality costumes, and while there is some truth to this, it is how the bulk pre-made costumes can keep their costs so low. It's not fair to really judge all pre-made costumes in this way, and it's certainly not the case of most commissioned costumes, as the people who make those costumes are pretty professional. Having this mentality about pre-made costumes kind of gives the air that making your own costume puts you in an elite category, but I don't think that the majority of cosplayers really truly feel this way. I think when they talk about pre-made costumes, they're focusing more on the Party City, Halloween City spirit, those type of pre-made costumes that really aren't cosplay. Obviously, you can use those costumes for cosplay, but the majority of those are made for just a night on the town. Now, what about the idea that those who make their own costumes tend to get a bit obsessed? Again, you've heard me talk about seams and how I couldn't get the color just right, so I couldn't bear the thought of people seeing my mediocre work. That kind of does sound a bit controlling of something that's supposed to be a fun hobby. But again, one of the points of cosplay is to show off your hard work and celebrate the character you love through the piece you made. So if it looks poorly made, the person who made it might feel that they'll be judged based off of that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to put forward your best work, especially when there is a lot of time, money, and effort that's put into it. The feeling that comes with making your own costume is really undescribable. You get this feeling of accomplishment, of pride, and especially when people acknowledge that you did a good job, it's like getting one of those hard-earned achievements in a video game. I think the thing to remember regardless is that while cosplay is largely about the costume, it's not just about craftsmanship. It's about bringing a character to life and celebrating an amazing series with fellow fans. It is important to have honesty, though. If you didn't make your costume, be sure to give credit to the person or company who did. We need to share and support each other, so referring people to a commissioner will help the community to continue to grow. And being more open about the costume-making process will make it more attainable to those who are trying to learn new skills. In closing, as long as conventions are full of cosplayers, I think it doesn't really matter if you bought it or made it. I know this podcast was a bit on the short side, but I felt it might get a bit too redundant, and most of the reasoning behind the anti-purchase costumes tend to be a bit catty, and I don't want my podcast to be filled with that sort of negativity. That being said, stay tuned for next week's episode when I discuss the issue of cosplay does not equal consent. Until then, stay crazy! Versus buying just plain black fabric, since I can't find the exact fabric I need, and it would likely be around $6.99 a yard anyway, and then take half an hour. Versus buying versus buying plain black fabric. Versus buying plain black fabric because I can't find the exact fabric anyway. That would likely be more than... Okay, I'll just keep that. Okay. I know I said I wasn't going to be talking about piecemealing a cosplay, but this is relevant to my experience. I know I said I wasn't going to be talking about piecemealing a cosplay together, but this is relevant to my experience because I always felt really guilty about buying a costume. Okay. That was easy.